Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Crash Course Studio. Welcome to the show. So, it's been a good morning so far. Woke up, got my little stretches and stuff in, you know. Drank some coffee, of course, and opened my phone and, yeah, exciting spoilers. Let's jump into them. So, first up, Coiling Rebirth. This card is actually perfect for a deck that I have been building for quite some time and reiterating on. So, I'm really excited about this one. A sorcery for 5 mana in black. Gift a card. I really do like this gift mechanic. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then if the gift was promised and that creature isn't legendary, create a token that's copy of it except a 1/1. I find it interesting that it like specifies like isn't legendary. I wonder why they did that. I really do. Because like obviously there's still some, you know, benefits you could get from it being a legendary creature. Like if it has an ETB or an LTB, you still get that effect, which yeah, that could help with some out there, obviously. Like, I mean, just think about, like, okay, like, and there's some creatures out there, legendary creatures that care about dying, like Kaiga. You know, you're essentially like, oh, okay, cool. I reanimate this, I get a copy of it, it dies, and I steal a creature permanently. But, yeah, I think it's a really cool effect. Again, when it comes to reanimation effects, 4 mana is your typical, like, zombify type effect. But, hey, 5 mana for basically 2. Yeah, you are giving away a card, but again, you can make a deal with that for that player. Be like, hey, you. I'll help you out a little bit, okay? You help me out. I get 2 things. Obviously, it's only a 1/1 copy of that creature, but the value you can get out of that is pretty absurd. Next up, Builder's Talent. Look at that cute little dude! For 1 and a white, we've got an enchantment class enters the battlefield. You get a 0/4 white wall creature token with defender. Does anyone else, like, in their mind, just like I just read out loud, like, read enters the battlefield still, even though it says enters? I just go, boop, I need to stop. Level 2, just costs 1 extra mana to do so. Whenever 1 or more non-creature, non-land permanent you control enter, put a counter on target creature control. It does specify 1 or more. So, like, if you're thinking, like, oh, cool, like a blink deck, which you could consider that with this potentially. Like, I mean, it is non-creature as well, so keep that in mind. It's like blinking, I guess, like enchantments or artifacts, etc. It still only has 1 counter. I don't know if that really needed to be limited in that way, but I guess it did. So there you go. But yeah, being able to get things in play, get counters on things. I'm sure there's some weird combos that work well with that as well. Anyways, level 3, which is basically 5 mana in white. When this class becomes level 3, return target non-creature non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. I mean, basically reanimation effect, essentially. Again, non-creature, though, so reanimation for non-creature. Could this see play like an Enchantress deck? Maybe. Yeah, I think it'd be a pretty specific one that really cares about getting counters on something, too. So Enchantress, maybe Artifacts deck, but again, like, it being enchantment itself obviously leans more that way. Next up, Blacksmith Talent. For a single red mana, we've got a class. When enters, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Sword. I don't know if we've ever had a card just named Sword. That's awesome. With equip, creature gets ++1 and equip 2. It's quite a bit to equip for a ++1, but alright. Level 2, which costs 3 mana essentially. Beginning of combat, your turn, attach target equipment you control to up to 1 target creature you control. So being able to just attach an equipment for free, obviously the one that comes to mind is like, was it Colossal Hammer, Giant's Hammer, whatever that one is, the +10/+10, but it costs 10 to equip. Yeah, getting that for free is quite nice. So if you have an equipment heavy deck, it could be worth like this investment out there. And during your turn for level 3, equipped creatures you control have double strike and haste. That's quite nice. So basically every single one of your equipment gives haste. That can be absolutely huge because you can swing right away at those creatures. And of course, double strike, very nice to have. So yeah, I mean, definitely for like an equipment focused deck, this could be a very good card in it. Costs a good amount of investment. Again, like 8 mana in total to get to that level 3, but still quite a lot of value to be had. Next up, Calamus Tide, sorcery for 6 mana in blue. Return up to 2 creatures to their owner's hands. Draw 2 cards and discard a card. Seems like a very limited card. Outcomes of removal. Yeah, and like card draw, you just have more efficient ways on both sides, obviously. So, and sorcery feed 6 mana, it's quite a bit. So I don't really see this seeing too much play in main decks at all. Next up, Fabled Passage, a reprint. Cool. Quite an expensive one, I believe, too. In case you didn't know what it is, tap, sacrifice it, select for a base land card, but on the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. Then if you control 4 more lands, untap that land. There you go. I can't remember how expensive this one is, but decently expensive. So nice little reprint there. Feed the Cycle, instant for 1 in a black. Dish cost, cast a spell, forge, or pay a black. Forging again is exiling 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrificing a food, target creature, or planeswalker. So We have a 2 mana, I mean, basically removal spell for creatures and planeswalkers. Typically, I mean, in the past, we've had that at 3, like Hero's Downfall types, essentially. So, again, this basically could cost 3. Or if you can forge, again, getting rid of 3 cards out of your graveyard for some decks, that's no big deal at all. If you don't care about your graveyard, throughout the game, you're just going to get things there anyways. Or if you have food, obviously, you could consider this. So yeah, good low-to-the-ground removal for decks. I'd say especially that have food, it can guarantee that they're going to have food, essentially. But yeah, if you can guarantee you've got graveyard stuff as well, by the time you need to use this to really get rid of a big creature or planeswalker, you probably have stuff in your graveyard to do so. Next up, Hazels Nocturne. An instant for 4 mana in black. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I mean, very specific. Again, it's like overpaying on both fronts. Again, like life drain and also bringing things back. When it comes to like bringing 2 creature cards from your graveyard back to your hand, I guess that probably costs 3 for the most part, except for like ones that are like, if they're the same type, you get them both back. But yeah, draining each opponent, that, yeah, I mean, it's probably costed what it should be, but like there's only so many decks out there that really care about this. The nice thing is it is instant speed, so you can keep mana up for it and utilize it when you need to. Next up, Heirloom Epic, an artifact for 1 mana with adorable art on it. Pay 4, tap, draw a card. For each mana in this ability's activation cost, you may tap an untapped creature control rather than pay that mana active on a sorcery. That's interesting because this is kind of like, oh my goodness, Convoke. There we go. That came to me. It's kind of like Convoke, but on an actual permanence ability, which is interesting versus on a spell. So yeah, I mean, just getting 1 mana to get this in play, that's obviously very cheap. 4 mana tap and draw a card is a lot. But again, if you can just say tap 4 mana or tap 4 creatures to do so, the problem here is that this is a sorcery speed thing, which is like when Wizards limits things like that, I'm like, why? Why? I don't think it needed to be limited in that way. Like, it wouldn't be overly powerful if it was. Just, you know, as long as you've got like 4 creatures ready to go right before your turn, you're like, okay, cool, tap those. I didn't need to block with them anyways. I'm good. But in this case, you obviously have to dedicate yourself to be like, oh, okay, tap these 4 creatures. Oh, I can't block with that anymore, or use them to attack. Or, I mean, yeah, whatever. If they have vigilance, sure. Okay. I think, I mean, maybe very specific decks that like can like flood the board with a lot of creatures and are okay with just tapping down some. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty specific card. Next up, Hoarders Overflow, an enchantment for 1 in a red, enters, and when you expend 4, put a stash counter on it. Again, expend 4 means that you've paid at least 4 mana, essentially, on a turn to cast a spell. Or to cast spell, I should say. Pay 1 a red, sacrifice it, discard your hand, then draw cards, equal number of stash counters on it. I mean, this seems perfect for one of my decks where you just get, like, Deep Glow Skate out again and again and again to, like, double up the number of counters on something. So, yeah, I mean, I guess if you're spending a good amount of mana, again, on not just your turn, but on other turns as well, by expending 4, you get counters on this quite a bit. Proliferate decks can definitely utilize it too, but it's kind of like a held, like, wheel for you. And again, you can draw more. You can draw less than 7, obviously, but you can also draw more than 7 too. So it's kind of like Magus the Wheel-esque, but on an enchantment, but like building over time. But then eventually you can just draw a ton of cards. So yeah, I think proliferate decks could really utilize something like this, or ones like, you know, my Deep Glow Skate deck, which are like, hey, get something out, get a counter on it, double it, double it, double it, double it, double it, and all of a sudden you're drawing 40 cards off of this. So yeah, quite a cool card. It's probably pretty specific again, unless you've got a deck that like really can get a lot of counters on it by casting a lot of spells. Again, you can do it on your opponent's turns as well. Next up, Honored Drayleader, a 1/1 scroll warrior for 3 mana and green, trample. When it enters, put a counter on it for each other scroll and food you control. When another squirrel or food you control enters, put a counter on it. So this one is kind of similar to a previous one that we saw that was like counting different creature types, but it's a 1/1 for 1. This one also 1/1 for 3 though, but it has trample and it enters with a good amount of counters on it potentially. So if you've got like a squirrel tribal deck, like Chatterfang, this can be absolutely massive for you. And again, it got trample, which is nice. Or a food deck like Guillaume or whatnot. Cool, get a ton of counters on it too. But then you can also keep building it throughout the game. Again, when squirrels are coming into play, when food's coming into play, it keeps getting larger and larger. So yeah, squirrel tribal decks, food decks can definitely consider this one as a giant threat. Next up, Mind Whisker. Cute name. Rat Wizard, 3/2 for 3 mana in blue. At the beginning drop, keep Surveil 1. Nice to be able to, you know, select the cards and, you know, get cards in your graveyard that you might need in your graveyard as well. As long as 7 or more cards in your graveyard, which obviously can be added to that Surveil, creatures opponents control get -1, -0. So a nice way to slightly shrink your opponent's army. And if you're playing against like a token deck that's like, go wide, got all these 1/1 soldiers, yay! And you're like, no, there's 0/1s. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, like, We have seen in the past certain cards that are like a 3 mana. I know I'm thinking of the 3 mana defender. It's like in an archive. Guys, the archives? Maybe. Scries 1 on your upkeep. So we have seen cards like that see some play again for decks that really care about manipulating the top of their deck. This one does as well, but it also helps you get things in your graveyard too. So like Self-Mill could consider it, as well as, you know, top deck manipulation type decks that care about what's on top. So oh gosh, what's that one that casts on the top and doubles up instant sorceries? That one, Melik. Next up, Patchwork Banner. This one's going to see a good amount of play. I can pretty much guarantee it. Artifact for 3. Enter, choose a creature type. Creature control the chosen type, get +1/+1. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. This is kind of like Heraldic Banner adjacent. Heraldic Banner is, I believe, and again, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on this, choose a color, and then creatures of that color get +1/+0 that you control, and also get tap for that color. That sees a good amount of play. And this one is more specific, but also more broad in a way. Because that one's like, okay, are you playing monocolor? It's probably pretty good if you have a decent amount of creatures. This one's like, okay, are you playing a creature type? Awesome. This taps for 1 mana of any color already, so it's already better in that aspect. And also it pumps all those creatures +1/+1. So yeah, if you have a tribal deck, you're probably going to want to consider this one. It is, and that's kind of the thing, like, Wizards is doing a better job these days of, they have like their 2 mana rocks that they're still making every now and then, and that is usually my go-to if I'm not playing in green, right? Because you want to ramp earlier and often, so on turn 2, you probably want to ramp that if you can. If you're going to be ramping a little bit later with a mana rock like this at 3, which is not as efficient, costing 3, tapping for 1 versus 2, tapping for 1, usually I want half the amount of mana back that I put into it. This is going to also help you, though, being an Anthem. And typically, like, Anthems cost, I mean, for this type, like 2 mana, essentially. The Rally one or whatever, I think. I can't remember the name of it from Kaldheim. But basically, yeah, that usually costs 2. So you're not really spending that much extra for a mana rock, and you're getting that out of it. It's quite nice. So, yeah, I can definitely see this one seeing a good amount of play. Again, lots of tribal decks out there. Next up, Dour Port-Mage. This is pretty spicy. A 1/3 frog wizard for 1 and a blue. I think we actually saw part of this card's text on the teaser for tomorrow. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. Pay 1 a blue, tap, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. Interesting. So this one does specify 1 or more. So if you got a Brago deck, you might be a bit disappointed that you're like, oh, yeah, I was just going to blink my entire army and be like, oh, cool, I get to draw 10. It's like, no, you get to draw 1 because it's limited in that. So it's still going to be good, obviously, in blink decks. Like every single time you blink a creature, you get to draw a card. So that's quite nice. That being said, it's not just blink. It's also obviously bounce, which you can see on the card too. And that can be handy as well. Like having that ability to bounce a creature you control back to its owner's hand can be very nice. Again, and thank goodness, Wizard just keeps doing this for like limiting things to sorcery speed. They didn't limit this sorcery speed. So being able to utilize it actually as a, hey, oh, you're trying to take out my commander? Okay, I'll bounce my commander back to my hand essentially so I can avoid having to recast it. I mean, I recast it, but not from the command zone. And I get to draw a card while doing so. So this is a card that I think can see play in a good amount of decks out there that are built around blink, built around bounce effects, built around, I mean, if your creatures are exiled too, that is counting as well. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. It's like anything but dying, literally anything but dying. I guess shuffling would be another one that would count. Like if someone oblations your creature, you're drawing, well, 2 from the oblation, but also 1 extra. So it's a very interesting card. It is limited a little bit, but also it does have a lot of potential. So yeah, I think good amount of players out there are going to be pretty excited about this one. But now this episode is coming to a close. It's time for me to hear from you in the comments below. So let me know what your thoughts are on all these cards. Yeah, I think, okay, so we got that one. I can't remember the name of the card, but like Read the Bones, but basically Surveil. That one, I think, is the common that might see the most play out of all the cards, not including, like, basic lands, of course. But, like, I think that one might see the most play. Patchwork Banner out of the uncommons, that mana rock that also is for tribal decks that, you know, gives them an anthem. That might see the most play out of all the uncommons. I mean, that thing, I'm not going to say it's like a, it's not, I'm not going to say a staple in tribal decks, but, like, tribal decks are going to be considering that one for a long time, I feel like, because sure, even if you're just like, you know what, I don't really need a less efficient mana rock, but you're like, oh, I could use like another anthem effect for this deck. You might just like throw this in for something else and just have like an extra mana rock essentially with it that also just happens to be an anthem to pump your team. So yeah, that can see play in quite a few decks out there. And again, with tribal decks, I think if you add up all the different tribes, like you have like the most popular, theme in all of Commander according to EDH Rec. So yeah, I definitely can see a lot of play out there. Regardless, very exciting spoiler season. Hope you're excited about these spoilers as well. Make sure you check out all my other quick takes and spoilers. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more episodes. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.